public service, someone who has and continues to fight for fairness, justice, and equity. Please join me in welcoming United States Senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders. I am here today because I can't vote. So I want to let everybody know why you should vote. Because as a daughter of immigrants, we are not going back and we're not listening to Donald Trump. We are going with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. We can't vote for Trump. And you know, as an undocumented person standing before you today, I want to use my voice and I want to let you know all the impacts that can happen if Trump gets elected into the office. Undocumented people, we're just people. We are not stealing anybody's jobs. We are not doing, we're not criminals. We are people. I really do want to like destigmatize how we are perceived. It's just, we can't go back. We are your neighbors, we are your friends, we are your classmates. We are not people that come into the country to steal your jobs, get your benefits. We can't even get benefits. Yeah, we can't even get benefits. I have DACA. That is, it gets me a work permit to work here in the United States. I am pursuing my master's in social work because I want to be involved in policy and make a change and help other people and just destigmatize everything that's going on, especially with undocumented immigrants. And you know, we're here in Lancaster. This is a welcoming city.
But it's a loud crowd.
Yeah.
This thing is not working.
It's not working. We can hear you. We can hear you.
All right, but can we make it a little bit louder?
I don't know if we can.
Hello. All right. Well, thank you all very much for coming out. What I want to do is chat for a few minutes. And mostly I want to hear from you. I really do. You know, sometimes we do very large events with thousands of people and you can't have any kind of interaction. So the advantage of doing something like this is that we can chat with each other. It goes without saying that I am in Pennsylvania yesterday and today for the sole purpose of doing everything I can to see that Kamala Harris becomes our next president. Bob Casey, your senator, is in a tough race, and I would appreciate you doing everything you can to make sure that Bob is reelected to the Senate. I want to start off, get my notes here, mentioning something to you that I saw today, was in the paper. In this campaign for president, 144 billionaires have contributed $695 million. 18% of all of the amount of money coming into the presidential campaign has come from 144 billionaires. Okay, that's about equally divided, as a matter of fact. What does that tell you? And not just billionaires, you know, that's not poor guys who are worth a few $100 million. They're not what does that tell you?
We got too many billionaires.
Yeah, but what else does it tell you?
It tells us that the rich are looking to consolidate power through politics.
Good. All right. So in other words, if you are a billionaire and you start up a super PAC, you know what a super PAC is? Yeah. So you start up a super PAC, you can contribute as much as you want to. So you put $50 million, not $50 million for you or me as an astronaut or some money. But if you're a billionaire, it's really not very much money at all. So, you know, it's a cup of coffee, English coffee. What it tells me is at a time when we have more income and wealth inequality, we'll talk about that in a minute, at a time when we have more concentration of ownership in our economy, it is not just that the billionaire class have extraordinary power over our economic life, they have and want more control over our political life as well. And in fact, if you look at campaign spending, you'll find institutions like the pharmaceutical industry contributing not just to one party, they contribute to both parties to make sure they can control the process that goes on. Today in America, as I mentioned, we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of this country. What does that mean in English?
System's rigged.
No, but tell me what it means in day-to-day life. Yeah.
Rich people have proportionally more money
Right.
than the poor than
All right. Today in America, you got 3 people who own more wealth than the bottom half of our country. Got it? So Elon Musk, who's floating around Pennsylvania now, and a couple of other guys, just those 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Is that satisfactory?
No.
Okay. Is that what America is supposed to be about?
No.
Is that discussed at all? Think about it the last time you heard it discussed on TV. Last time you heard it discussed, maybe with the exception of me and a few others in Congress. Why are we discussing that issue if it's really quite so outrageous? Why? Okay. If somebody got shot down the street, it would be a front page story, right? But somehow this issue of mass income and wealth inequality is not an issue. Why?
Corporate control of the media.
Good. All right, tell me about that. What does that mean? Does
That means millionaires get to say
Good.
what
All right.
what we see in front of us.
Exactly. I saw a hand back there, yeah.
Money is able to represent what you want to represent. And if you have all the money, you get to make up all of what this country gets to represent.
Good. All right. So the issue is Donald Trump goes around and he says it's fake news, these reporters lie all the time. It's not true. I've dealt with media for decades. Very, very rarely does a reporter lie or intentionally try to distort what you say. The issue is what reporters and TV stations prioritize. What do they think is important? All right. The issue of mass income and wealth inequality, the fact that the people on top have never ever had it so good, while 60% of working people are struggling to get by on inadequate incomes and are living paycheck to paycheck, that is not a story. Got it? So somebody decides what's important. So I've been in a million debates in my life. Nobody ever asked me, Bernie, what are you going to do about income and wealth inequality? It's not even on the table. And that is because the people who own the media are doing phenomenally well. They don't really want to start a discussion. If the whole country was talking about, God, this is outrageous. 3 people owning more wealth, top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 90%. Trump's tax breaks making the handful of people incredibly rich. Boy, what are we going to do about that? Let's have that discussion. Not on the table. Not to be discussed. All right, what other issues of enormous consequence are not being discussed? Yep.
Reproductive freedom.
No, that is being discussed. Oh, okay.
Whoever you want to call.
No, that is being discussed. I mean, I would say that Kamala Harris from day one has made reproductive freedom central to her campaign. And her view is, as I suspect most of your views are, I don't want to get into it because it's so obvious, is women have a right to control their own bodies, right? That is an issue that has been widely discussed every day. Yes, I see a hand back there.
The overwhelming cost of tuition. The overwhelming cost of tuition.
Okay, all right, well, let me, that's discussed, but let's talk about what's not discussed. How much is it, this an expensive school here? No, how much does it cost to go here?
12th grade.
How much?
12th grade tuition, total around 30-ish.
Okay. The issue is not just that college is important. There's a kind of a deeper issue, I think, all right? 100 years ago or so, very brave people, working class people, said, you know what, it's not right that my kids, because I'm working class or I'm poor, can't get a decent education while the kids of the rich are. And my kids are working in factories, or they're working in fields or in farms, and that's not right. And they fought for what was then a very radical concept called public education, right? So public education, which I went to, it means that from kindergarten through high school, no one asks you how much money your family makes, right? You walk in the door, you get an education. Did God create the reality that public education ends at grade 12? See, getting back to your point there, all right? Are there other countries that say, the world has changed in 100 years? Think about all the changes that have taken place where you guys have got to learn about technology, etc., that people 100 years ago did not have to learn. So what do you think is, if I as a United States Senator want to make sure that we have the best educated workforce in the world, we have enormous amount of work to be done. My God, we need more doctors, we need more nurses, we need more dentists, we need more mental health practitioners, we need more carpenters, electricians, plumbers. We need people to help us deal with climate change. We need great teachers. We need all kinds of people. And in order to have that quality workforce, we need the best educated workforce in the world. Okay? Given that reality, what should we be doing in your judgment? What makes sense? If I want to see us have an educated workforce that can deal with childcare, deal with healthcare, deal with technology, what should we do? What should I be doing? Yes. Yeah.
Invest in them, invest in their opportunities.
Exactly. In other words, I want you, and by the way, not just young people, I want people to get the best education that they can. Does it make sense within that context to say, oh, sorry, you want a good education, you're going to have to graduate school $50,000 in debt? That's a disincentive, right? Now, if I want you to go to medical school or dental school, you know what you're going to graduate in debt? If you start off with that much money, who knows? That's exactly right. Who said that? Sorry. You think you're going to go to medical school?
I am.
You're in medical school now?
I will.
Okay. So you're looking forward to $500,000 in debt?
Not really.
All right, but think, here we are as a nation which desperately needs physicians. We have a massive shortage of doctors and dentists and nurses. And we're saying to you, hey, we'd love you to be a doctor. Oh, by the way, you're gonna have to go $500,000 into debt. That's patently insane, all right? Other countries do things a lot more sensibly. Germany, for instance. Anyone know what tuition is in Germany?
Free.
Radical like that. Okay. And in fact, I think American students can actually go to Germany and get a, is that right? Okay. All right. So what I want you to do now is think really big, okay? And understand that in many ways, not all, what takes place in the United States is very different than what exists in many other industrialized countries, all right? So if I tell you, is it a radical idea that I want all young people, and people, not just young people, to get the best education that they can, because we need them, we desperately need them to do the important work that's out there, and therefore we should encourage them and certainly not provide massive disincentives by having large tuitions in the. Is that a radical idea? Do we even talk about it? Okay, and I'm I'm proud that during my presidential campaign, we did talk about it. Forced that discussion. The result of that, and President Biden has done a good job on that, is one of the things we have done is forgiven the student debt of 5 million Americans. These are all working class Americans, which takes me to another issue. What I'm trying to do today is to suggest to you that many of the most important issues facing this country get very little discussion. Very little discussion. And I want you to be thinking about why that is and how we can force more discussion. So I used the word, for example, just used it a moment ago. I said Biden forgave student debt of 5 million working class Americans. Working class, man, that's a radical idea. Do you hear that expression very often? So I guess we must be a classless society. I guess there are no rich or poor or middle class. We're all, everybody's about the same, do you think? Otherwise we would be talking about class. What does that mean? Now I come from a working class family. Some of you do, some of you may not. Talk about class, and why don't we talk about class? If I just mentioned to you earlier, 3 people have more wealth than the bottom half of American society. If I mentioned to you that 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, that's certainly working class. How come we don't talk about class in America? We talk about women's rights. We talk about, Black Lives Matter. We talk about gay rights, all of which I'm sympathetic to. But somehow or another, we don't talk about class in America. Why is that? Yep.
Well, the wealthy, uber wealthy, have a lot of political power, and if we started talking about class more often, probably open up more people's eyes to the issues that might threaten their wealth.
Good. More discussion. Why don't we talk about it more? Yep.
Because then we might unionize.
Well, I heard that. That's a good point. All right. Now, I just came from a meeting. Really, it's a great meeting. What do we have? That's 400 people or so in Harrisburg with the Pennsylvania Trade Unionists. It was a great meeting. But I think your point is well taken. If we start talking about class, then what we learn is that you have some people who have enormous wealth and power, and you have other people who are struggling. And then people are going to say, well, what can we do to improve that situation, and how do we do it together? That's what a union is. A union basically is saying that I can't do it myself. I need to work with other people to have a contract with my employer that gives me better wages and working conditions and other benefits. So I think that point is well taken. Why else are we not talking about class? Yep.
In a culture of temporarily embarrassed millionaires, it's embarrassing to admit we're not millionaires.
Very good point. Very good point. That's right. I guess everybody who's not a millionaire is a failure in life. And this is a very important point. All right. So, how many of you hope to be teachers, for example? Any potential teachers? Okay. Child care workers, working with kids? Okay, great. We have teachers in America, in Pennsylvania, in Vermont, who do unbelievable work. They save kids' lives, they give kids hope, they educate kids, and maybe they make $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. Are they failures in life? We have people right now working in child care centers who make 14 or 15 bucks an hour. Are they failures in life? All right. In fact, they are doing, as a teacher or a child care worker, you're doing some of the most important work that can be done. There are other people who are hedge fund managers on Wall Street or engaged in high-speed trading who make millions of dollars, many millions of dollars a year, trying to determine what the value of the English pound might be or the German mark might be. And if it goes up or goes down, and you're quick about it with these very high-speed computers, you can make zillions of dollars trading these things. Is that particularly useful work? No. Is that more or less useful than a kindergarten teacher? Yes. It is, all right? But we don't talk about it. Your point is well taken. I mean, those people in society's eyes are a failure. If you go to Harvard University, you're going to find very few of the elite universities where the young graduates are going to go into teaching in public schools. Why would I do that? I'm a failure if I do that, really. I mean, who wants to talk about that? Who determines what is important work and what is not important work?
The elites, the rich.
How do they do that?
What?
How do they do that?
They write about, they give benefits to who they believe are successful and important.
Good. So it seems to me that one of the things that we have got to do as a society is redefine what is important and redefine what is success. I'm going to give you an example. I wrote a book recently. I should have brought copies of it here. Not to give to you. And in it, we have a chapter on education, in which we talk to the Minister of Education in Finland. But one of the points she made was that to be a teacher in Finland is very, very competitive. It's as competitive, I think, as being a doctor. It's a very prestigious position, okay? Because I think people there understand how important that work is, and they earn good salaries, have good prestige, and so forth and so on. What the mentality, what Trumpism is about in many respects, to be above and beyond individual policies, is the belief essentially that we are all in it ourselves, for yourselves. And your success depends upon how much money you make. And it really doesn't matter, by the way, if you lie and cheat and steal in order to make that money, because that's kind of part of the system. It's a Wild West and you do what you have to do. And you're really a sucker, and I'm somewhat of a dummy if you want to spend your life teaching kids, or you want to be a primary care physician when you can become a specialist and make 10 times more money. All right? How significant is that? Go deep onto that one. What does that say about society? Where do you think we have got to go to turn that around? Thoughts? Disagree with me if you want. Yeah.
Americans are, society at large is hyper individualistic, and so we all feel like if I'm not wealthy or if I'm not successful, that is all on me 100%. It's not like, some people are different, and it's not just Donald Trump telling people that, but that feels like something that's ingrained in Americans at large.
That's right.
And I think we need to start looking more towards our communities and recognize, and like kind of ties into like class consciousness and understanding that we're all in it together. And it's not necessarily one man against the world. It's like we are our community against everything that we're facing.
Good point. Yeah. Yes, you were.
Okay. I think 2 points. One, that there's kind of a contradiction in the system in that the jobs that really make the economy actually work don't even get paid to do so. And beyond that, the backbone of society, including the arts and humanities, get completely just no money at all. Although from age 0 to 100, we read books and we acknowledge things that deeply help society that never get acknowledged.
That's right. Very good point. I mean, artists, help us understand the world that we live in, whether it's through the written word or through music or dance. And they play an enormously important role. And yet, artists get very little financial support. Yes, waiting back down.
How do we change the conversation without it being turned reflexively into, well, if you want to change it, that means you're a socialist or a communist, right? Which is a catchword for disregard them as you want to lead us to ruin or communism, which I disbelieve in, but it seems anytime one would bring up the points of these changes, that's the label you would get.
Well, it's a good question. And that's what, for want of a better word, the other side would like us to believe. But one of the things that I'm very proud of is that when I ran for president, we took on the entire Democratic establishment and the corporate world and the corporate media. We ended up winning 23 states. And what that showed is that the ideas that we're talking about here today are not radical ideas. Donald Trump every day, probably today, will announce that, Bernie Sanders is a far leftist and Kamala Harris is supposedly to the left of him. But all of the things, which is, well, for better or worse, not true. But what is true, and we poll these things, is that a very significant majority of Americans agree with what we're trying to do. So if you say to, I want to get into the healthcare issue in a minute, but if you say to the American people, do a poll, you say, is healthcare a human right or not? Should everybody get healthcare? You know what? Overwhelming majority of American people say yes.
Yeah.
And yet, you're not even hearing that issue discussed on the campaign trail. The idea that universal healthcare is a radical communist socialist idea, well, it exists in every other major country on earth, for a start, but it becomes marginalized when, in fact, the vast majority of the American people support the concept, even though it's not talked about on TV or anything else. I mean, I think what the system does is try to make you think that ideas like valuing the work of teachers or childcare workers or carpenters, that's more important work than high-speed trading. They don't want you to be thinking about that. They don't want you to be thinking about the fact that healthcare is a human right and asking the question, simple question which you've never seen on television, never seen this discussion. Here's the truth. In America today, we are spending twice as much per person on healthcare as the people of any other country. Are some of you guys thinking about going into healthcare? Okay. So this is what you should know. We're spending over $13,000 per person. Family of four, that's $52,000. This combines all healthcare spending, Medicare, Medicaid, VA, out-of-pocket expense, private insurance, employer contributions. Add it all together, $13,000 plus per person. And yet, we have 85 million people uninsured or underinsured. Okay? How does that happen? We are the only major country not to guarantee health care over. How does that happen? What's the reason for that? Yep.
There's more money in the broken system.
Oh, that's right. Well, who benefits? Who's getting the money from that broken system? Yep.
Well, it's kind of two entities. You have the companies that are in the politician's pocket, and the politicians are in the insurance company's pocket, so they benefit off of each other.
Yep. All right. So what you got is the drug companies that charge you the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. By far, it's an issue we've been working on with some success. Top 10 companies made over $100 billion last year. $100 billion. Insurance companies making enormous sums of money. Okay? So the system is working very well for the people who own the system. Drug companies and insurance companies, medical equipment suppliers, etc. Is obviously not working for the American people. All right, tell me about healthcare and why some of you want to go into healthcare. Who's going to go? Who wants to talk about that, ma'am?
Yeah, I currently work at a hospital in an inpatient psychiatric unit, and
I'm sorry, in the what unit?
Psychiatric.
Psychiatric, okay.
And there are a lot of times that patients are kind of forced out of our unit when they're not ready because the insurance says, oh, you don't need it, or they won't cover it and then they can't afford it, especially with people who are currently homeless or have state insurance, that kind of thing. And it's just really opened my eyes to the fact that we really don't care about mental health, even though everyone experiences it. Everyone's going to struggle with it at some point, some more severe than others. And then it also kind of opens my eyes into the disparities between race as well and how that impacts mental health, especially with when we have patients that come in who are deemed as violent or aggressive, and then they come in and they're dealing with psychiatric hallucinations or delusions, and it's like they're not actually, like, yes, they're acting violent, but they're not violent human beings.
Good. Well, thank you. All right, I want to hear from more of you because I'm chairman of the committee that deals with the young lady right there. Yeah? Stand up if you may, please.
I'm a pre-med student at your college. My end goal would be to be in the cardio world. I have a strong interest in it because we have so many low-income neighborhoods that deal with more heart issues than any other community, and it's because they're dispositioned to
things that are built around the community, like factories, like things that are getting into the air and disproportionately affecting Black and brown people.
Good.
So I believe I would like to help with that.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Other people in healthcare, I want to say that. Yes, gentleman right here.
So I initially wanted to be a mergers and acquisitions attorney, but throughout my philosophy degree, doing ethics research and so forth, I was just like, well, I guess I can't be that much of an asshole. So I pivoted into healthcare. I've been going back and forth between being a psychiatric NP and a certified nurse anesthetist, and the finance points you're bringing up really resonate with me, because from a moral perspective, I'd like to be an NP. But from a financial perspective, housing is ridiculously expensive. You don't even need to think about it if you're an anesthetist. Education is expensive. Some of my buddies are spending so much money on their education, and then they still need to save for their retirement. If you're an anesthetist, you could just control-alt-delete their kids' college tuition and not even think about it very long.
Right.
So I'm kind of curious what you think about steering money towards professions that are actually like valuable.
Good. Well, within that, you know, I'm the chairman of the committee that deals with this stuff. So what we try to do, and we just did not have the political support in the Senate to do it, and certainly we would not have had it in the House, is to revolutionize primary health care in America. So as broken as the system is in general, it is even more broken in terms of primary care. So we end up spending about half of what other major countries, now we're spending twice as much per capita, but on primary care, we're spending about half as much as other countries to make sure that when you're sick, people can get to a doctor, get to a nurse, that kids have the disease prevention that they need, that we have nurses in schools effectively, that we're encouraging people to have healthy diets and healthy lifestyles, and that we have a situation where people can afford the medicine that they need. So we're way behind, and that is counterproductive, as obviously, not only for people's health, but for the financial situation. So if you don't get a chance, you know, Betty was talking about that, if you live in a community where there's a lot of pollution, for example, all right, what does it mean? It means people are going to get sick. It means they're going to end up in the hospital at great expense to the system. So if you want to save money, you create a healthier society, you focus on disease prevention, you make sure that people can get to a doctor when they need to. There are 60,000 people who die every single year in this country, and you know why? They don't get to a doctor when they should, because they don't have the insurance, or they have high deductibles and co-payments. All right? So the goal here, when we talk about healthcare, is to take on the greed of the insurance companies and the drug companies and create a healthcare system which is designed, and this is not easy. You know, every system in the world has its problems. But a system which says, you know what, I don't care if you're rich, poor, young, or old, you go to the doctor anytime you want, you don't have to worry about the cost. If you end up in a hospital, you don't have to worry about your family going bankrupt. All right, that's the overview. Now, how do you make that happen? Well, you need more doctors, nurses, etc. All right, let me get to a hands. People have not yet made a comment.
Can I just ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
So, just to kind of steer more directly towards my question, housing super expensive, insurance of various kinds is so expensive. Those positions, I don't think it's just a cultural perspective thing that people are concerned about being teachers. They're concerned that if they become teachers, they won't even be able to afford their homes.
Good.
So I guess what I'm curious about is you either have to decrease the cost of living significantly, or you have to increase the income of valuable
Well, you do both.
positions.
So what do you do? Just in terms of your question, you do two things. Number one, and I've got legislation which I've introduced to do this, it says anyone who starts off as a teacher, for example, will make at least $60,000 a year, starting salary, all right? Number two, we're trying to decrease the cost of housing. Housing, we have a massive housing shortage, especially for low income and working class people. So you gotta build that housing. So then you may say, well, that's fine, but how do you get the money to do that? which gets us back to the issue of income and wealth inequality and the fact that billionaires pay an effective tax rate lower than middle-class people, okay? So you can raise more money. We are, again, underline, always remember, when we talk about people being thrown out of psychiatric care, when we talk about the high cost of housing, when we talk about people uninsured or underinsured, you're living not in a poor country. You know, if we were in Haiti right now, you'd have a different type of discussion. We're a poor country. What can we afford? Not much. This is the richest country in the history of the world. You think we should get used to seeing people sleep out on the streets in virtually every city in America, including my own? All right. We're used to it now. We're in Europe. We don't have enough housing. Okay? So to answer your question, you do both. And in the richest country in the history of the world, you can do it. And other countries are doing this. It's not a radical idea. As I said before, healthcare, there's no out-of-pocket expense in most countries around the world. And they end up spending as a society less, far less than we've been. Then what's the difference? I get attacked, the 30-second ads always attacking me. Bernie Sanders wants to raise your taxes on healthcare. Yeah, I do, but I want to wipe out all of the private insurance costs that you have. So you and your employer no longer has to pay private insurance. No deductibles, no out-of-pocket expenses, substantially lower costs for prescription drugs. At the end of the day, under my plan, you save substantial sums of money. I don't know that people stay up nights worrying, oh my God, I love paying money into the insurance companies. You know, $10,000 a year to the insurance, that's great, $5,000 more in taxes. Oh, that's terrible. All right, so you would end up paying less, but it would be publicly funded, which is what virtually all other major countries are doing. All right, I want to skip. We talked about healthcare. All right, stay on health. You want to stay on healthcare for a minute?
I have a different one.
All right, what's your question?
So I'm going to talk about the Palestine topic.
Good.
I've seen your posts. I've seen interviews. You want to stop U.S. Financially supporting Israel.
Yep.
But the Harris campaign hasn't wavered on this topic. At least to me, that's what I've seen. They continue rhetoric that supports the Israeli government. And if I care about this issue, why should I vote for Harris?
Very good question. All right, let me ask you all a question. What's your name, by the way?
Elliot.
Elliot? All right. Elliot asked a very good, important question. And I don't, before we get into my views on it, should the United States, in your view, continue to fund the Netanyahu Israeli government?
No.
All right, who wants to take the other side? I can't believe it's unanimous. Anybody disagree? Yep.
I think that if the Arabs get their way, they would throw the Israelis into the ocean.
Okay. All right, my own view is this. Hamas is a terrible, and I'm going to answer your question. Hamas is a god-awful terrorist organization that committed a disgusting terrorist attack against Israel that killed young people, and women and children in very brutal ways, and took 200 hostages. And Israel, like any country on earth, the United States were attacked, and we were attacked at 9/11, has a right to defend itself, and Israel certainly does, has a right to go to war against Hamas. But what Israel has done, in my view, under a very right-wing Netanyahu government, which has in the cabinet some out-and-out anti-Palestinian racists, no ifs, buts, and maybes. What they have done is gone to war against the entire Palestinian people in violation of international law, in fact, U.S. law. War is an ugly business and it's a disgusting business, and it pains me very much that the year 2024 we're looking at the horror in Gaza and the Ukraine and so forth and so on. One might have thought that of all the suffering and all the wars for so many centuries, humanity might have learned that maybe killing each other is not the best way forward. But be that as it may, it is very clear to me that Israel right now regards Palestinian lives very cheaply. And the result of that has been the killing of 42,000 Palestinians, the wounding of 100,000, the destruction of almost all of Gaza, their infrastructure, their healthcare system, every university, 12 universities, all have been bombed. And now what's even worse is a result of blocking humanitarian aid. There are God knows how many, we don't know, media is not allowed to cover it, Israel has stopped media coverage of it, but we assume that there are many, many thousands of little children who are suffering from malnutrition and starvation, okay? It happens by American law that if a government stops humanitarian aid from coming in, that's a violation of US law and we should not be funding that government. In fact, in a few weeks, within a month, I'll be having a resolution on the floor of the Senate which will deal just with this issue. So, I agree with the question. Now you're asking me, all right, you feel strongly about that, why should you vote for Kamala Harris? And this is, and what you said about Biden and Harris is correct. In my view, I am close to the president, and I think on domestic policies he has been very strong and quite good. I think he is dead wrong on this policy, period. But in the world that you live in the world that I live in, I have to deal with this every single day. And that is, you gotta make tough choices. And you gotta say to yourself, okay, I really disagree with Kamala Harris on this issue. Do I want Donald Trump to be elected president? Do I want somebody who is president who does not believe that women have a right to control their own bodies? Is that who you want as president? Do you want somebody who would become president who believes that climate change is a hoax? Do you want somebody who's president who lies all of the time? Do you want somebody who's president who gives massive tax breaks to billionaires? So I think sometimes in the world that we live in, we can be pure, but politics is not a question of purity. It's sometimes having to make difficult and painful decisions. And my job, and that's what I'm paid to do, I have to do it all the time. I can tell you I can vote no on every bloody bill that comes before the Senate, because there's often a lot wrong with those bills. But I represent my state, and I gotta do what's best. So I often, have to make that decision, but I don't always vote no. So what I'm saying to you is, you're right on the issue, but I hope very much you don't sit it out. I hope you don't wake up the day after the election and find that Pennsylvania, maybe the most important battleground state right now, goes for Trump, because if that happens, he will likely become president. So sometimes you gotta make difficult choices, and this is one. So you can disagree with Kamala Harris, and I would also tell you this, that on this issue even, Trump is worse than Harris.
Discussion that higher education is indoctrinating people rather than educating
right.
people. And when you talk about changing people's attitudes and perspectives, surely higher education is helpful in opening up people's perspectives. And yet here in Pennsylvania, we're the 47th in funding higher education, and a lot of people are now pushing back against people getting higher education.
Right.
What would you think we can do about that, and how do you think it impacts our society?
That's a great question, and you're right. There has been in recent years, led by right-wing Republicans, oh, these people go to college, they're all elitists, they're being indoctrinated, they're all left-wing people. And in fact, there is in some quarters, I don't want to overstate it, an effort to keep people without education, to see them as cogs in the machine. Your job is to go out when you're 18 or 19, get a job, and you work for your employer, not ask any questions, and that's what your job is, go into the military. What you and I believe is the growth of the human mind is what life is about, and we believe in education. And on top of that, people are saying, why am I funding the state university here in Pennsylvania? My kids don't go there, and so on. So it is a fundamental issue. I don't have a magical solution. It's part of the cultural wars that are going on right now. My generation grew up believing that higher education, not only higher education in college, we desperately need, construction workers in this country who need, it's not so easy, getting the kind of training that they need as well. And that's got to be put into the equation. But it is a struggle. And I think uneducated people will tell you how stupid education is because they don't have the education to appreciate what education can do. But it becomes a political issue and a cultural issue. I don't have any magical answers, but it's one, our position should be, it seems to me, that education and intellectual growth is a lifetime job. It's something we should be doing all of our lives. And if you're 80 years old, you want to take a course at the local college, God bless you. You should be able to do it without financial concerns. Because education and the growth of the human mind is itself, you know, an important human aspect of being human, right?
Yes.
So, ain't easy. Good question. But it's one of the many wars that we're waging right now. Let me get the people up and ask the first question. Yeah, gentleman there.
So you talked a lot today about working class support and what we can do in terms of rhetoric to get the working class back on our side. You mentioned that although Trump has gained a lot of support from billionaires such as Elon Musk, your deal is associated with J.D. Vance, it is no secret that Trump has gained a lot of support from working class people, specifically men, young men. The party's not the same party that it was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago with Bush. Right, so how do you suggest that Democrats win back that working class support from such a big demographic?
Good, excellent question, and you're quite right. I want to stay on that issue. I haven't ever talked about it publicly. I want to get your views on this. How you do it, I think the reason for the growth of Trumpism is not that young working class men think that it's a great idea to give tax breaks to billionaires, or that they stay up nights thinking that climate change is a hoax, or that they think that women, some may, but I think, no, most don't, think that women should not be able to control their own bodies, or that they're homophobic, or sexist, or racist, some may be, of course. People, no matter what class you're of, people call those views. I think there is a feeling that the Democratic Party, which was once considered to be in this country, under Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, the party of the working class has abandoned the American working class. And there's some truth in that. I think, again, they're better than the Republicans, but I'm not going to sit here, if they were stronger, we would have national health care. You would not go deeply into debt to get a college education, and so forth. So I think the way back is to have a party which stands up very clearly and says, you know what? Everybody in this country is entitled to health care as a human right. If you want to go to get a higher education, you want to be a plumber, you know what? Ain't going to cost you a nickel because we desperately need you. You know what? We're going to raise taxes on billionaires and lower your taxes. You know what? We're not going to forget rural America. We're going to help family-based agriculture. You know what? You got a kid, that's great. You're going to have quality child care at a cost that's not going to bankrupt you. In other words, that's what the Democratic Party has not done. And I think if they do that, Republicans can't go there because that's not really what they believe. They'll lie and so forth. So that's number one. But I want to raise, you said an interesting point. In this election, there will be a significant gender gap. You'll know what a gender gap is. Women will vote more liberal, men vote more conservative. So I want to ask, and then number two, this blew me away. Somebody told me this about a month ago, and I checked it out. At my local university, University of Vermont, I think 60 or 65% of the students, maybe in the freshman class, are women. Okay? And we're seeing, is that true here as well?
Yes.
Okay. What is all of that about? So you're seeing young men not going to college, voting for Donald Trump. Okay? What's going on there? Who wants to, let me get some hands here. It's a tough question. And no one knows exactly the answer, but, and this is a reverse, by the way. When I was your age, it was the other way around, I think. A lot more men were getting a higher education than women, etc. So something has happened, and I'd like some thoughts about it. Let me get, anyone not spoken yet? Yeah, right here. Stand up if you could.
One theory, and there was an episode of The Daily on this a few days ago, I believe, is that the public education system is failing young boys starting in elementary school and middle school because of this emphasis on academic rigor that doesn't account for hyperactivity or other forms of expression or differences in learning. And it's discouraging young boys at a young age away from education and at the same time advantaging girls that are more prone, whether through just natural temperament or through socialization, to sit still, read, pay attention, and promoting their academic success.
Okay, thank you. More thoughts on this subject? Anyone have any more thoughts? Yeah, right here.
I think a big problem is also the huge amount of right-wing content that is catered specifically to young men. People like Andrew Tate, Elon Musk, boosting all this right-wing content that is like targeting people's masculinity.
Good.
Also affects that.
Okay, good point. Further discussion on that? Anyone have thoughts on that? Yep, right here.
So this is something that we've discussed in my gender and sexualities class, and we've had tremendous success with the progress of women's rights and how women are viewed culturally and how they should be viewed, but we haven't had much of that as far as men go. We still expect men to be the heads of households when they don't necessarily have to be.
Okay, very good. More discussion. Yep, right here.
As more and more women get college educations and men are less and less college educated, I think a lot of young men feel like they are falling behind socioeconomically, and think for some reason that electing Donald Trump will give them more influence again in society and more power.
Yep, let me get anyone not spoken yet. Okay, green sweatshirt.
So I just have a quick book recommendation to start. It's Richard Reeves on Men and Boys. He wrote extensively about this issue already. The second thing that I would bring up is if you have 2/3 of the good grades going to the women in that kind of top quadrant, and men getting 2/3 of the crappiest grades, it's going to be harder for them to successfully get into good universities. I also, the last kind of point is, I've noticed a lot of my friends having these kind of very sexist and not particularly intelligent views towards women and like only kind of associating with them when they want to date them, and I think that's stupid. Because if you look at the kind of cognitive metrics, like men and boys are scoring the same as women and girls, but yet we're getting shittier grades. Well, what's the difference? It's organization, it's capacity to collaborate. Get a group going with the 3 smartest type A basic white girls in your class. And you do the open-endeds, they work on the Quizlets, everybody go gets to 97 and you move on.
All right. All right. On that note. All right, listen, thanks very much. Well, I just want to say this, and my wife always tells me that I leave people totally pessimistic, so I don't want to do that. The truth is the country faces enormous crises. No ifs, buts, and maybes about it, but we can solve them. They are solvable, they really are. And I would end on this note. We have made enormous progress in this country that every person in this room should be proud of in terms of civil rights. The idea now, that we have a black woman running and may become president of the United States, and people are blasé about it. Man, when I was a kid, nobody in a million years would have thought we would ever have a black president to begin with, and certainly not a black woman. I can remember in my tenure in Congress that in the Senate, where there were 100 people, there were 2 women and 98 men. Okay, and that is radically changing. So in terms of civil rights, this country, way before you guys were born, and you know this from history, in the South, there were, black people could drink from a stupid water fountain or go to a school. And in terms of gay rights, when I was growing up, none of the kids that I associated acknowledged being gay. All right? All of that has radically changed in a very positive way, breaking down bigotry and making America a more democratic society. Where we have not made progress, and in fact have lost progress, is the economic struggle. 50, 60 years ago, you could have one person in a family working 40 hours a week, paying the bills, taking care of his or her kids. That's not the case today. More income and wealth inequality. Wages have been stagnant for American workers for over 50 years. Okay, we have not made progress. But change can happen, and sometimes change takes place very, very quickly. And one of the very nice things that we're seeing, very positive, is the growth and militancy of the trade union movement in America. You maybe notice unions going out on strike, winning big contracts, younger people wanting to form unions. Unions have never been more popular in many decades than they are today. All right? So we can do it. But what I want you to understand is don't believe what is told to you. The system out there in 100 different ways tries to communicate to you that you're powerless. What can you do? Elon Musk has all the wealth, he has all the power, you got nothing. Forget it, don't even try. But the truth of the matter is that from an historical perspective, what always happens is when people come together, change can take place. Change always takes place, not from the top on down, but from the bottom on up. So our job is to, in the next 9 days, help elect Kamala Harris to be president, although we will have disagreements with Kamala on this or that issue. But the day after she's elected, let's continue the effort to bring our people together, black and white, Latino, Asian, gay, straight, whatever it may be, around a movement that fights for an economy and a government that works for all, not just the few. Thank you very much.